Hello, this is my reading of The Crucible. Here I'll be starting with Act 1, and I will also be saying parts that you should probably write down. So, for me in the six, they're highlighted. For you, you can just write them down as notes if you're going to take them. So, I'll just make sure to let you know. The Crucible, Act 1. Characters: Reverend Paris, Abigail Williams, Mary Warren, Betty, John Proctor, Thomas Putman, Miss Putman, Rebecca Nurse, Reverend Hale, and Tituba. A small upper bedroom in the house of Reverend Samuel Paris, Salem, Massachusetts, in the spring of the year 1692. There is a narrow window to the left, though it's let. Sorry, this text right here is in italics and it's kind of hard to read. Through its leaded panes, the morning sunlight streams. A candle still burns near the bed, which is at the right. A chest, a hair, and a desk, a chair, and a small table are the other furnishings. At the back, a door opens on the landing of the stairway to the ground floor. The room gives off an air of clean spareness. The roof rafters are exposed, and the wood colors are raw and mellowed. As the curtain rises, Revered Paris is discovered kneeling beside the bed, evidently in a prayer. His daughter, Betty Paris, aged 10, is lying on the bed. His niece, Abigail Williams, 17, enters. She is all worry and priorities. Dramatic exposition / stage directions for Reverend Samuel Paris. This part is highlighted for me, and I will tell you when it stops. At the time of these events, Paris was in his middle 40s. In history, he cut a villainous path, and there is very little good to be said for him. He believed he was being prosecuted wherever he went, despite his best efforts to win people and God to his side. In meeting, he felt insulted if someone rose to shut the door without first asking his permission. He was a widower with no interest in children or talent with them. He regarded them as young adults, and until this strange crisis, he, like the rest of Salem, never conceived that children were anything but thankful for being permitted to walk, straight eyes, slightly lowered arms to the sides, and mouths shut until bidden to speak. His house stood in the quote-unquote town, but today we would hardly call it a village. The meeting house was nearby, and from this point outward, toward the bay or inland, there were few small, windowed, dark houses snuggling against the raw Massachusetts winter. Salem had been established hardly for 40 years before. To the European world, with the whole province, was a barbaric frontier inhabited by a seat of fanatics, who nevertheless were shipping out products of slowly increasing quantity and value. And that's where the highlighted end. No one can really know what their lives were like. They had no novelist, and would not have permitted anyone to read a novel, if one were handy. Their creed forbade anything resembling a theater or vain enjoyment. They did not celebrate Christmas, and a holiday from work meant only that they must concentrate even more on prayer, which is not to say that nothing broke into this strict and somber way of life. When a new farmhouse was built, friends assembled to raise the roof, and they would be special foods cooked and probably some potent cider passed around. This was a good supply of ne'er-do-wells in Salem. who dallied at the shovelboard and Bridget Bishop's tavern. Probably more than the creed, hard work kept the morals of the place from spoiling, for the people were forced to fight the land like heroes for every grain of corn, and no man had very much time for fooling around. That there were some jokers, however, is indicated by the practice of appropriating a two-man patrol whose duty was to walk forth in the time of God's worship to take notice of such as either lie about the meeting house without attending to the word of the ordinances, or that lie at home or in the fields without giving food account thereof, and to take the names of such persons and to present them to the magistrates, whereby they may be accordingly proceeded against. This predilection for minding other people's business was time hoarding among the people of Salem, and it undoubtedly created many of the suspicions which were to feed the coming madness. It was also, in my opinion, one of the things that a John Proctor would rebel against, for the time of the armed camp had almost passed, and since the country was reasonably, although not wholly, safe, the old disciplines were beginning to rankle. But as in all such matters, the issue was not clear-cut, for danger was still a possibility, and in unity lay at the promise of safety. The edge of the wilderness was close by. The American continent stretched endlessly west, and it was full of mystery for them. It stood, dark and threatening, over their shoulders, night and day. For out of it, Indian tribes marauded from time to time, and Reverend Paris had parishioners who had lost relatives to these heathen. Reverend Paris is praying now, and though we cannot hear his words, a sense of his confusioned hands about him. He mumbles and seems about to weep. Then he weeps, then prays again. But his daughter does not stir on the bed. Stage directions for Tituba. This part is also highlighted. The door opens, and his slave enters. Tituba, in her mid-40s, Tituba is in her mid-40s. Paris brought her with him from Barbados, where he spent some years as a merchant, before entering the ministry. She enters as one does, who can no longer bear to be bared from the sight of her beloved, but she is also frightened because her slave sense has warned her that as always trouble in this house eventually lands on her back. Tituba, already taking a step backwards. My Betty be hearty soon? Paris, out of here. Tituba. The highlighted part ends after after the statement that everything that happens in this house lands on her. Tituba, backing to the door. My Betty's not going to die. Paris, scrambling to his feet in a fury. Out of my sight. She is gone. Out of my... He is overcome with sobs. He clamps his teeth against them and closes the door and leans against it, exhausted. Oh my God. God help me. Quaking with fear, mumbling to himself through his sobs, he goes to the bed and gently takes Betty's hand. Betty, child, dear child, will you wake? Will you open your eyes, Betty, little one? Stage directions for Abigail. This part is highlighted in blue. She is bending to kneel again when his niece, Abigail Williams, 17, enters. A strikingly beautiful girl, an orphan, with has endless capacity for disassembling. Now she is all worry and apprehension and priorities and property. Abigail. Uncle, the rumor of witchcraft is all about. I think you'd best go down and deny it yourself. The parlor is packed with people, sir. I'll sit with her. Paris. Abigail, I cannot go before the congregation when I know you have not opened with me. What did you do with her in the forest? Abigail. We did dance, uncle, and when you leaped out of the bush so suddenly, Betty was frightened, and then she fainted, and there's the whole of it. Paris. Now look you, child, your punishment will come in its time. But if you trafficked with spirits in the forest, I must know it now, for surely my enemies will, and they will, ruin me with it. Abigail. But we never conjured spirits. Paris. Then why can she not move herself since midnight? This child is desperate. Abigail lowers her eyes. It must come out. My enemies will bring it out. Abigail, do you understand that I have many enemies? Abigail. I have heard of it, uncle. Paris. Then there is a fraction that is sworn to drive me from my pulpit? Do you understand that? Abigail. I think so, sir. Paris. Now, in the midst of such disruption, my own household is discovered to be the very center of some obscene practice. Abominations are done in the forest. Abigail. It were sport, uncle. Paris, pointing at Betty. You call this sport? Pause. Enter Miss Anne Putman. She is a twisted souled of 45, a death-ridden woman, haunted by dreams. Paris. As soon as the door begins to open, no, I cannot have anyone. She sees her. A certain defense springs into him, although his worry remains. Why, Goody Putman, come in, Miss Putman, full of breath, shiny-eyed. It is a marvel. It is surely a stroke of hell upon you. Paris. No, Goody Putman. It is... Miss Putman, glancing at Betty. How did she fly? How high? Paris. No, she never flew. Miss Putman, very pleased with it. Why, it's sure she did. Mr. Colin saw her going over Ingersoll's barn, and it come down light as a bird, he says. Paris. Now look, your Goody Putman. She never. Enter Thomas Putman, a well-to-do, bambled landowner, near 50. Oh, good morning, Mr. Putman. Putman. It is a providence. The thing is out now. It is a providence. He goes directly to the bed. Paris. What's out, sir? What's... Miss Putman goes to bed. Putman. Why, her eyes is closed. Look you, Anne. Miss Putman. Why, that's strange to Paris. Ours is open. Paris. Your Ruth is sick? Miss Putman. I do not call it sick. The devil's touch is heavier than sick. It's death. You know, it's death driven into them, forked and hooved. Paris. Oh, pray not. Why, how does Ruth ail? Miss Putman. She ails, she must. She never walked this morning, but her eyes open, and she walks and hears not, sees not. Not can't eat. Her soul is taken, surely. Paris is struck. Putman, as though for further details. They say you sent for Reverend Hale of Beverly. Paris, with dwindling conviction now. A precaution only. He has much experience in all demonic arts, and I, Miss Putman. He has indeed, and found a witch in Beverly last year, and let you remember that. Paris. Now, Goody Anne, the only thought that were a witch, and I am certain there be no element of witchcraft here. Putman. No witchcraft. Now look you, Miss Paris. Paris. Thomas, I pray you, leap not to witchcraft. I know that you least of all, Thomas, will never wish so dastardly a charge laid upon me. We cannot leap to witchcraft. They will howl me out of Salem for such corruption in my house. This part is highlighted in purple. Dramatic exposition for Thomas and Putnam. A word about Thomas Putnam. He was a man with many grievances, at least one of which appears justified. Some time before, his wife's brother-in-law, James Warley, had been turned down as minister of Salem. Bailey had all the qualifications and a 2/3 vote into the bargain, but a faction stopped his acceptance for some reasons they are not clear. Thomas Putnam was the eldest son of the richest man in the village. He had fought the Indians at Narragansett and was deeply interested in parish affairs. He undoubtedly felt it poor payment that the village should so blatantly disregard his candidate for one of its more important offices, especially since he regarded himself as the intellectual superior for most of the people around him. His vindictive nature was demonstrated long before the witchcraft began. Another former Salem minister, George Burroughs, had to borrow money to pay for his wife's funeral, and since the parish was remiss in his salary, he was soon bankrupt. Thomas and his brother John had Burgos jailed for debts the man did not owe. The incident is important only in that Burgos succeeded in becoming minister, where Bailey, Thomas Putnam's brother-in-law, had been rejected. The motive of resentment is clear here. Thomas Putnam felt that his own name and the honor of his family had been smirched by the village, and he meant to right matters however he could. Another reason to believe him a deeply embittered man was his attempt to break his father's will, which left a disappropriate amount to his stepbrother, as which every other public cause which he tried to force his way had failed in this. So it is not so surprising to find that so many accusations against people are in the handwriting of Thomas Putnam, or that his name is so often found as a witness corroborating the supernatural testimony, or that his daughter led the crying out as the most opportune junctures of the trials, especially when, but we'll speak of that when we come to it. And that's the end of the highlighted section. Miss Putnam, Reverend Paris, I have laid 7 babies unbaptized in the earth. Believe me, sir, you never saw more hardy babies born, and yet each would wither in my arms the very night of their birth. And now this year, my Ruth, my only, I see her turning strange. A secret child she has become this year, and shrivels like a sucking mouth we're pulling on her life too. And so I thought to send her to your Tituba. Paris. Tituba? What? My Tituba? Anne. Tituba knows how to speak to the dead, Minister Paris. Paris. Goody Anne. It is a formidable sin to conjure up the dead. Anne. I take it on my soul. But who else may surely tell us who murdered my babies? Paris. Woman! Anne. They were murdered, Mr. Paris. And mark this proof. Mark it. Last night my Ruth were ever so close to their little spirits. I know it, sir. For how else is she stuck dumb now except some power of darkness would stop her mouth? It is a marvelous sign, Minister Paris. Putnam. Don't you understand it, sir? There is a murdering witch among us, bound to keep herself in the dark. Let your enemies make of it what they will. You cannot blink it any more. Paris. Then you were conjuring spirits last night. Abigail. Not I, sir. Not I. Tituba and Ruth. Paris turns now, with new fear, and goes to Betty, looks down at her, and then gazing off. Oh, Abigail, what proper payment for my charity? Now I am undone. Putnam. You are not undone. Let you take hold here. Wait for no one to change you. Declare it yourself. You have discovered witchcraft. Paris, will you leave me now? I would pray a while alone. Putnam, come down, speak to them, pray with them. They're thirsting for your word, minister. Surely you'll pray with them. Paris, Swade, I'll lead them in a psalm, but let you say nothing of witchcraft yet. Paris, Putnam, and Miss Putnam go out. Mary Warren, Abby, we've got to tell. Witchery a hanging, like they done in Boston 2 years ago. We must tell the truth, Abby. You'll only be whipped for dancing and the other things. Abigail, oh, we'll be whipped. Mary Warren, I've never done none of it, Abby. I only looked. Betty on bed whimpers. Abigail turns at her once. Abigail, Betty, goes to her. Now, Betty dear, wake up now. It's Abigail. She sits Betty up and fiercely shakes her. I'll beat you, Betty. Betty whimpers. My, you seem improving. I talked to your papa, and I told him everything. So there's nothing to. Betty darts off the bed, frightening of Abigail, and flattens herself against the wall. I want my mama. Abigail, with alarm, as she cautiously approaches Betty. What ails you, Betty? Your mama's dead and buried. Betty, I'll fly to mama. Let me fly. She raises her arms, though, to fly, and shrieks towards the window. Gets one leg out. Abigail, pulling her away from window. I told him everything he knows now. He knows everything Betty, you drank... Betty. You drank blood, Abby. You didn't tell him that? You drank a charm to kill John Proctor's wife. You drank a charm to kill Goody Proctor. Abigail. Betty, you never say that again. You will never... Betty. You did. You drank a charm to kill John Proctor's wife. You drank a charm to kill Goody Proctor. Abigail smashes her across the face. Shut it, now. Shut it. Betty collapses on the bed, begins to sob. Abigail. Now look you, all of you. We dance into the conjured Ruth Putman's dead sisters. And that is all. And mark this. Let either of you breathe a word, or the edge of a word, about the other things, and I will come to you in the black of some terrible night, and I will bring a pointy reckoning that will shudder you. And you know I can do it. I saw Indians smash my dear parents' head on the pillow next to mine, and I have seen some reddish work done at night, and I can make you wish you had never seen the sun go down. Goes and roughly sits Betty up. Now you, sit up and stop this. Betty collapses in her hands and lies on the bed. Mary Warren, with hysterical fright. What's got her? Abigail stares in fright at Betty. Abby was going to die. It's a sin to conjure, and we... Abigail. I say shut it, Mary Warren. Enter John Proctor. Upon seeing him, Mary Warren jumps in fright. This part is highlighted in yellow. Dramatic exposition for John Proctor. Proctor was a farmer in his middle 30s. He needed not to have been a partisan of any faction in the town, but there is evidence to suggest that he had a sharp and biting way with hypocrisies. He was the kind of man, powerful of body, even-tempered, and not easily led, who cannot refuse support to partitions without drawing their deepest resentments. In Proctor's presence, a fool felt his foolishness instantly, and a Proctor is always marked for calumny therefore. But as we shall see, the steady manner he displays does not spring from the untroubled soul. He is a sinner not only against the moral fashion of the time, but against his own version of decent conduct. These people had no ritual for the washing away of sins. It is another trait we inherited from them, and it has helped to discipline us as well as to breed hypocrisy among us. Proctor, respected and even feared in Salem, has come to regard himself as a kind of fraud, but no hint of this has yet appeared on the surface. And as he enters from the crowded parlor below, it is a man in his prime we see, with a quiet confidence and unexpressed hidden force. Mary Warren, his servant, can barely speak for embarrassment and fear. Mary Warren. Oh, I'm just going home, Mr. Proctor. Proctor. Be you foolish, Mary Warren? Be you deaf? I forbid you to leave the house. Did I not? Why shall I pay you out? Or why should I pay you? I am looking for you more often than my own cows. Mary Warren. I only came to see the great doings in the world. Proctor. I'll show you great doings on your arse one of these days. Now get you home. My wife is waiting with your work. Mary Warren exits. Since Proctor's entrance, Abigail has stood as though on tiptoe, absorbing his presence, wide-eyed. He glances at her, then goes to Betty on the bed. Gah, I'd almost forgot how strong you were, John Proctor. Proctor, looking at Abigail now, the faintest suggestion of knowing smile on his face. What's this mischief here? Abigail, with nervous laughter. Oh, she's gone silly somehow. Proctor. The road past my house is a pilgrimage to Salem all morning. The town's mumbling witchcraft. Abigail. Oh, posh. Whiningly she comes a little closer on with a confidential, wicked air. We were all dancing in the woods last night, and my uncle leaped in on us. She took fright is all. Proctor, his smile widening. Ah, you're wicked, aren't they? Aren't ye? A thrill of expanded laughter escapes her, and she dares come closer, feverishly looking into his eyes. You'll be clapped in the stocks before you're 20. He takes a step to go, and she springs in his path. Abigail. Give me word, John. A soft word. Her concentrated desire destroys his smile. Proctor. No, Abby, that's done with. Abigail, tanningly. You come 5 miles to see a silly girl fly? I know you better. Proctor, setting his firmly out of his parlor. I come to see what's mischief your uncle's brewing. Now, put it out of mind, Abby. Abigail. You're surely sporting with me. Proctor, you know me better. Abigail. I know you clutched my back behind your house and sweated like a stallion whenever I come near. Or did I dream that? It's she put me out. You cannot pretend it were you. I saw your face when she put me out, and you loved me then, and you do now. Proctor. Abby. That's a wild thing to say. Abigail. A wild thing may say wild things, but not so wild, I think. You are no wintering man. I know you, John. I know you. She is weeping. I cannot sleep for dreaming. I cannot dream, but I wake and walk about the house as though I'd find you coming through some door. She clutches him desperately. Proctor, gently pressing her from him with great sympathy, but firmly. Child? Abigail, with a flash of anger. How dare you call me child? Oh, I marveled to have such a strong man, yet such a sickly wife be. Proctor, angered at himself as well. You speak of nothing of Elizabeth. Abigail, she is blackening my name in the village. She is telling lies about me. She is a cold, sniveling woman, and you bend to her. Let her turn you like a... Proctor, shaking her. Do you look for a whipping? Abigail, in tears. I look for John Proctor that took me from my sleep and put knowledge in my heart. I never knew that presence Salem was. I never knew the lying lessons I was taught by all these Christian women and their coveted men. And now you bid me tear the light out of my eyes. I will not. I cannot. You love me, John Proctor, and whatever sin it is, you love me. He turns abruptly and goes out. She rushes to him. John, pity me, pity me. Betty claps her ear suddenly and whines loudly. Abigail. Betty, repeatedly. Proctor, growing unnerved. What's she doing, girl? What ails you? Stop that wailing. Paris rushes in. Paris, what happened? And what are you doing to her? Betty! She rushes to the bed, crying, Betty! Betty! Miss Putman enters feverishly with curiosity, and with her Thomas Putman. Paris at the bed. She keeps slapping Betty's face while she moans and tries to get up. Abigail. She heard you singing, and suddenly she's up and screaming. Miss Putman. The psalm, the palm. She cannot bear to hear the Lord's name. Mark it for a sign. Mark it. Rebecca nurse enters. Rebecca. There is a hard sickness here. Gills scoring. So please keep quiet. Gills. I've not said a word. No one here can testify I've said a word. Is she going to fly again? I hear she flies. Putman. Man, be quiet now. Everything is quiet. Rebecca walks across the room to the bed. Gentless excludes from her. Betty is quietly whimpering, her eyes shut. Rebecca simply stands over the child, who gradually quiets. This part is highlighted in green. Dramatic exposition for Francis and Rebecca Nurse, and about the conflicts between the Putmans and the nurses. And while they are so absorbed, we may put in a word for Rebecca. Rebecca was the only wife of Francis Nurse, who, from all accounts, was one of those men for whom both sides of the argument had to respect. He also called upon to arbitrate disputes as though he were an official judge, and Rebecca also enjoyed the high opinions most people had for him. By the time of the delusion, they had 300 acres, and their children were settled into separate homesteads within the same estate. Francis had originally rented the land, and one theory has it that as he gradually paid for the land, he raised social status, and those who resented his rise. And there were those who resented his rise. Another suggestion to explain this systematic campaign against Rebecca and inferentially against Francis is the land war he fought with his neighbors. One of whom was a Putman. This squabble grew to the proportions of a battle in the woods between partisans of both sides, and it is said to have lasted for 2 days. As for Rebecca herself, the general opinion of the character was so high to explain how everyone dared cry her out for a witch, and more how adults could bring themselves to lay hands on her. We must look to the fields and the boundaries at the time. As we have seen, Thomas Putman's man for the Salem ministry was Bailey. The nurse clan had been in the faction that prevented Bailey's taking office. In addition, certain families allied to the nurses by blood or friendship, and whose farms were contagious with the nurse farm, or close to it, combined to break away from the Salem town authority and set up Topsfield, a new and independent entity whose existence was resented by old Salemites. That the guiding hand behind the outcry was Putman's is indicated by the fact that as soon as it began, this Topsfield nurse faction absented themselves from church in protest and disbelief. It was Edward and Jonathan Putman who signed the first complaint against Rebecca, and Thomas's little sister was the one who fell into a fit at the hearing and pointed to Rebecca as her attacker. To top it all, Miss Putman, who is now staring at the bewitched child on the bed, soon accused Rebecca's spirit of tempting her to iniquity, a charge had more truth in it than Miss Putman's could know. Miss Putman, astonished. The highlighted area finished after the tempting her to inquiry, a charge that had more truth in it than Miss Putman could know. Miss Bowman, astonished. What have you done? Paris, wondrous and relieved. What do you make it at, Rebecca? Make of it, Rebecca? Footman, eagerly. Goody nurse, will you go to my Ruth and see if you can wake her too? Rebecca, sitting. I think she'll wake in time. Pray calm yourselves. I bet I have 11 children, and I am 26 times a grandma. And I have seen them through their silly seasons, and when it comes to them, they will run the devil's bow-legged, keeping up with their mischief. I think she'll wake when she tires of it. A child's spirit is like a child. You can never catch it by running after it. You must stand still, and for love, it will soon itself come back. Proctor. Aye, that's the truth of it, Rebecca. Miss Putman. This is no silly season, Rebecca. My Ruth is bewildered. Rebecca, she cannot eat. Rebecca. Perhaps she is not hungered yet. To Paris. I hope you are not decided to go in search of those loose spirits. Miss Paris, I've heard promise to that outside. Paris. A wide opinions running in the parish that the devil may be among us, and I would satisfy them that they are all wrong. Proctor. They'll let you come and call them wrong. Did you consult the wardress before you called this minister to look for devils? Paris. She is not coming to look for devils. Proctor. Then what is she coming for? Putman. There be children dying in the village, mister. Proctor. I see none dying. This society will be a bag to swing around your head, Miss Putman. To Paris. Did you call a meeting before you? Putman. I am sick of meetings. Cannot the man turn his head without he having a meeting? Proctor. He may turn his head, but not to hell. Rebecca. Pray, John, be calm. Boss. He differs, sir. Mr. Paris. I think you'd best send Reverend Hale back as soon as he come. This will set us all to arguing against the society, and we thought to have peace this year. I think we ought to rely on the doctor now, and good prayer. Miss Bowman. Rebecca, the doctor's baffled. Rebecca. There is no prejudiced danger in the seeking of loose spirits, I fear. I fear it, let us blame ourselves, and Putman. How may we blame ourselves? I am the one of 9 sons, and Putman's seed have peopled this province, and yet I have but 1 child left of 8, and now she shrivels. Rebecca. I cannot fathom that. Miss Putman, with a growing edge of sarcasm. But I must. You think of it God's work, you should never lose a child nor grandchild either, and bury all but 1. There are wheels within wheels in this village, and fires within fires. Putman. To Paris. When Reverend Hale comes, you will proceed to look for signs of witchcraft here. Proctor. To Putman. You cannot command, Mr. Paris. We vote by name in this society, not by a creed. I have enough trouble without I come 5 miles to head him preach. Only half hellfire and bloody damnation. This is to heart, Miss Paris. There are many others who stay away from the church these days, because you hardly ever mention God anymore. Enter the Reverend Hale, who just arrived from Beverly. This part is highlighted in blue. Dramatic exposition about Reverend Hale. Mr. Hale is nearing 40. A tight-skinned, eager-eyed intellectual. This is a beloved errand for him. On being called here to associate witchcraft, he felt the pride of the specialist whose unique knowledge has at last been publicly called for. Like almost all men of learning, He spent a good deal of his time pondering the invisible world, especially since he had himself encountered a witch in his parish not long before. That woman, however, turned into a mere pest under his searching scrutiny, and the child she had allegedly been afflicting recovered her normal behavior after Hale and given her his kindness and a few days of rest in his own house. However, that experience never raised a doubt in his mind as to the reality of the underworld, or the existence of Lucifer, many-faced Liduans. Then his belief is not to his discreet Betty minds that Hale were, and still are, convinced that there is a society of spirits beyond our ken. One cannot help noting that one of his lines has never yet raised a laugh in an audience that has not seen this play. It is assurance that we cannot look to superstitions in this. The devil is precise. Eventually, we are not quite certain, even now, whether diabolism is holy and not to be scoffed at. And it is no accident that we could be so easily amused. Coming into Salem now, Reverend Hale conceives of himself much as a new doctor on his first call. His painfully acquired armory of symptoms, catchwords, and diagnostic procedures are now to be put to use at last. The road from Beverly is usually busy this morning, but he has passed 100 rumors that make him smile at the ignorance of Marini. It is most precise science. He feels himself aligned with the best minds of Europe, kings, philosophers, scientists, and ecclesiastics of all churches. His goal is light, goodness, and its preservation. He knows the exaltation of the blessed, whose intelligence sharpened by minute examinations of amorous tracts, it finally called upon to face what may be bloody fight with the fiend himself. And that is the end of the blue highlighted section. Hale. Pray you, someone take these. Paris, delighted. Mr. Hale, oh, it is good to see you again. Taking some books. They're heavy. Hale, sitting down his books. They must be. They're weighed with authority. Paris, a little scared. Will you do come prepared? Hale, we shall need a hard study if it comes to tracking down the old boy. Noticing Rebecca. You cannot be Rebecca, nurse. Rebecca. I am, sir. Do you know me? Hale. It's strange how I knew you. But I suppose you look as such a good soul should we have all heard from great charities in Beverly. Paris. Do you know this gentleman? Mr. Thomas, footman, and his good wife Anne. Hale. Footman. I had not expected such a distinguished company, sir. Footman, please. It does not seem to help us today, Mr. Hale. We look to you to come to our house and save our child. Hale. Your child ails too? Miss Footman. Her soul seems flown away. She sleeps, and yet she walks. Footman. She cannot eat. Hale. Cannot eat. Thinks on it. Then to Proctor and Gill's quarry. Do you men have affected children? Paris. No. These are farmers, John Proctor. Proctor. I've heard you to be a sensible man, Mr. Hale. I hope you have some of it in Salem. Proctor goes to Hale and stands embarrassed for an instant. Paris. Quickly. Will you look at my daughter, sir? Leads Hale to the bed. She has tried to leap out of the window. We discovered her this morning on High Road, waving her arms as though she'd fly. Hale, narrowing his eyes. Tries to fly. Footman. She cannot bear to hear the Lord's name. Mr. Hale, that's a sure sign of witchcraft afloat. Hale, holding up his hands. No, no. Now let me instruct you. We cannot look into superstitions in this. The devil is precise. The marks of his presence are def- definite as stone. And I must tell you all that I shall not proceed unless you are prepared to believe me, if I should find no bruise of hell upon her. Paris. It is agreed, sir. It is agreed. We will abide by your judgment. Hale. Good then. Goes to bed. Looks down at Betty. To Paris. Now, sir, what were your first warnings of this strangeness? Paris. Why, sir, I discovered her inciting Abigail, and my niece, and 10 or 12 other girls dancing in the forest last night. Hale, surprised. Do you permit dancing? Paris. No, no. It were secret. Hale goes to his books, opens one, turns pages, and reads. All wait eagerly. Paris, hushed. What book is that? Hale, with the tasty love of intellectual pursuit. Here is the invisible word, caught, defined, and escalated. In these books the devil stands, stripped of all his brute disguises. Have no fear now. I mean to crush him utterly if he has shown his face. Rebecca. I think I'll go, then. I'm too old for this. I pray to God for you, sir. Paris. With trepidation and resentment. I hope you do not mean we go to Satan here. Slight pause. Rebecca. I wish I knew. She goes out. They feel resentful of her note of moral superiority. Putman abruptly. Come, Hale. Let's get on. Sit you here. Gills. Mr. Hale, I have always wanted to ask a learned man, what signifies the reading of strange books? Hale. What books? Gills. I cannot tell. She hides them. Hale. Who does this? Gills. Martha, my wife. I have walked at night many a times and found her in a corner reading a book. Now what do you make of that? Hales. Well, that's not necessarily. Gills. It discomforts me. Last night, mark this. I tried and could not say my prayers. And then she closed her book and walks out the house. And suddenly, mark this, I could pray again. Dramatic exposition for Gil's Corey. Old Gills must be spoken for, if only because his fate was to be remarkable, and so different from that of all others. He was. Oh, this is also highlighted in green since dramatic exposition for Gil's Corey. He was in his early 80s at the time, and was the most comical hero in history. No man had ever been blamed for such. If a cow was missing, the first thought was to look around Corey's house. A fire blazing up in the night brought suspicion of arson to his door. They did give a hoot for public opinion, and only in his last years, after he had married Martha, did he bother much with the church. And she stopped his prayer is very probable. But he forgot to say that he'd only recently learned any prayers, and didn't take much to make him stumble over them. He was a crank and a nuisance, but withal a deeply innocent and brave man. In court once, he was asked if it were true that he had been frightened by the behavior of a hog, and had then said he knew it to be the devil's in an animal shape. What frightened you? He was asked. He forgot everything but the word frightened, and instantly replied, I do not know that I ever spoke that word in my life. End of the highlighted section. Hale. Ah, the stoppage of prayer. That is strange. I'll speak on that with you. Gills. I'm not saying she's touched with the devil now, but I'd admire to know that she reads and why she hides them. She'll not answer me, you see. Hale. I will discuss it to all. Now mark me. If the devil is in her, you will witness some frightful wonders in this room. So please to keep your wits about you. Mr. Putnam. Stand close to the case. She flies. To Betty. Now, Betty dear, will you sit up? Putum comes in closer, ready-handed. Hale sits Betty up, but she hangs limp in his hands. She observes her carefully. The others watch breathlessly. Can you hear me? I am John Hale, Minister of Beverly. Does someone afflict you, child? I need not be a woman, mind you, or a man. Perhaps some bird invisible to others comes to you. Perhaps a pig, a mouse, or any beast at all. Is there some figure of birds you fly? The child remains limp in his hands. In silence, he lays her back on the pillow, now holding out his hands towards her. B in tones. In a nomi, something, infernos. She does not stir. He turns to Abigail, his eyes narrowing. Abigail, what sort of dancing were you doing with her in the forest? Abigail, why, common dancing is all. Paris, I think I ought to say that I saw a kettle in the grass where they were dancing. Abigail, that was only soup. Hale, what sort of soup were in this kettle? Abigail, why, it were beans and lentils, I think. And Hale, Miss Paris, did you not notice, did you, any living thing in the kettle? A mouse, perhaps, or a spider, a frog? Paris, fearfully, I do. I believe there was some movement in the soup. Abigail, that jumped in. We never put it in. Hale, quickly, what jumped in? Abigail, why, a little frog jumped. Paris, a frog, Abby. Hale, grasping Abigail. Abigail, it may be your cousin is dying. Did you call the devil last night? Abigail, I never called him. Tituba. Paris, blanched. She called the devil? Hale, I shall speak with Tituba. Paris, Goody Ann, will you bring her up? Miss Pudd'em exits. Hale, how does she call him? Abigail, I know not. She spoke Barbodes. Hale, did you feel any strangeness when she called him? A sudden cold wind, perhaps? A trembling below the ground? Abigail, I did not see no devil, shaking Betty. Betty, wake up. Betty. Hale, you cannot evade me, Abigail. Did your cousin drink any of the brew in that kettle? Abigail, she never drank it. Did you drink it? No, sir, said Abigail. Hale, did Tituba ask you to drink it? Abigail, she tried, but I refused. Hale, why are you concealing? Have you sold yourself to Lucifer? Abigail, I never sold myself. I'm a good girl. I'm a proper girl. Miss Pudd'em enters with Tituba, and instantly Abigail points at Tituba. Abigail, she made me do it. She made Betty do it. Tituba, shocked and angry. Abby. Abigail, she makes me drink blood. Paris, blood. Miss Pudd'em, my baby's blood? Tituba, no, chicken blood. I gave she chicken blood. Hale, woman, have you enlisted these children for the devil? Tituba, no, sir. I don't truck with the devil. Hale, why can she not wake? Are you silencing this child? Tituba, I love me Betty. Hale, you have sent your spirit out upon this child, have you not? Are you gathering souls for the devil? Abigail, she sends her spirit on me in church. She makes me laugh at prayer. She comes to me every night to go and drink blood. Tituba, you beg me to conjure. She makes me make charm. Abigail, don't lie. To Hale, she comes to me while I sleep. She's always making me dream corruptions. Tituba, why would you say that, Abby? Abigail, sometimes I wake and find myself standing in the open doorway, and not a stitch on my body. I always hear her laughing in my sleep. I hear her singing a Barbuda song and tempting me with Tituba. Master Reverend, I never... Hale, resolve now. Tituba, I want you to wake this child. Tituba, I have no power on this child, sir. Hale, you most certainly do, and you will free her from it now. When did you compact with the devil? Tituba, I do not compact with no devil. Paris. You will confess yourself, or I will take you out and whip you to death, Tituba. Paris. This woman must be hanged. She must be taken and hanged. Tituba, terrified, falls on her knees. No, no, don't hang Tituba. I'll tell him I don't desire to work for him, sir. Paris. The devil? Hale. Then you saw him. Tituba weeps. Now, Tituba, I know when we bind ourselves to hell, it is very hard to break with it. We're going to help you tear yourself free. Tituba, frightened by the coming process. Mr. Reverend, I do believe someone else be witching these children. Hale. Who? Tituba. I don't know, sir, but the devil's got him numerous witches. Hale. Does he? It is a clue. Tituba, look into my eyes. Come, look into me. She raises her eyes to his fearfully. You would be a good Christian woman, would you not, Tituba? Tituba, aye, sir, a good Christian woman. Hale, when the devil comes to you, does he ever come with another person? She stares into his face. Perhaps another person in the village, someone you know. Paris, who come with him? Sarah Good? Did you ever see Sarah Good with him, or Osborne? Paris, what is a man or woman? Was it man or woman came with him? Tituba, man or woman? Was a woman. Paris, a woman? A woman, you say? What woman? Tituba, it was black dark, and I... Paris, you could see him, but you could not see her? Tituba, well, they was always hiding. They was always talking, and they was always running around, carrying on. Paris, you mean out of Salem? Salem witches? Tituba, I believe so, yes, sir. Now Hale takes her hand. He is surprised. Hale, Tituba, you must have no fear and tell us who they are. Do you understand? We will protect you. The devil can never overcome a menace, sir. You know that. Do you not? Tituba kisses Hale's hands. Aye, sir. Oh, I do. Hale, you have confessed yourself to witchcraft, and that speaks a wish into heaven's side, and we will bless you, Tituba. Tituba, relieved, deeply relieved. Oh, God bless you, Mr. Hale. Hale, with rising escalation. You're God's instrument. Put it in your hands to discover the devil's agents among us. You are selected, Tituba, and you are chosen to help us cleanse our village. So speak utterly, Tituba. Turn your back on him and face God. Face God, Tituba, and God will protect you. Tituba, joining with him. Hale recites the line as well. Oh God, protect Tituba. Hale, kindly. Who came to you with the devil? 2, 3, 4? How many? Tituba pants and begins rocking back and forth again, staring ahead. Tituba. There was 4. Paris, pressing in with her. Who? Their names. Tituba, suddenly bursting out. Oh, how many times he bid me kill you, Mr. Paris. Paris, kill me? Tituba, in a fury. He says Mr. Paris must be killed. He bid me rise out of bed and cut your throat, they gasp. But I tell him no. I don't hate that man. I don't want to kill that man. And then he comes one stormy night and tells me, and he say, look, I have white people belong to me. And look, and there was Goody Good. Paris, Sarah Good. Tituba, rocking and weeping. Aye, sir, and Goody Osborne. Miss Putman, I knew it. Goody Osborne were midwife to me 3 times. I begged you, Thomas, didn't I? I begged him not to call Osborne because I feared her. My baby's always shriveled in her hands. Hale, take courage, you must give us all their names. How can you bear to see this child suffering? Look at her, Tituba, incites at Betty's. Look at her God-given innocence. Her soul is so tender, we must protect her. Tituba, the devil, is out and preying on her, like a beast upon the flesh of a pure lamb. God will bless you for your help. Abigail rises, staring as though inspired, and cries out, Abigail, I want to open myself. They turn to her, startled as she is entrapped, and though in a pearly light. I want the light of God. I want the sweet love of Jesus. I dance for the devil. I saw him. I wrote it in his book. I go back to Jesus. I kiss his hand. I saw Sarah good with the devil. I saw Goody Osborne with the devil. I saw Bridget Bishop with the devil. As she is speaking, Betty is rising from the bed, a fever in her eyes, and she picks up the chant. Betty, starting to. I saw George Jacobs with the devil. I saw Goody Ho with the devil. Paris. She speaks! He rushes to embrace Betty. Hail. Glory to God. It is broken. They are free. The scene begins to slowly fade out as Abigail and Betty cry out. Almost on top of each other, cries. Betty. I saw Martha Bellows with the devil. Abigail. I saw Goody Sibber with the devil. It is rising to a great glee. Putman. I'll call the marshal. The marshal. Paris is shouting a prayer of thanksgiving. Betty. I saw Alice Barrow with the devil. Hail as Putman goes out. Let the marshal bring irons. Abigail. A Goody Hawkins with the devil. Betty. I saw Goody Bibbers with the devil. Abigail. I saw Goody Booth with the devil. On their ecstatic cries, the scene ends. The curtain falls. That was a long Act 1 for the book, and Act 2 will be in a separate video since this video is already an hour long. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed.